Okay, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com. And I just noticed the light is a little dimmer than I thought it would be. I have to turn that up a little bit there. Filming at a little bit of a different angle today. Hey, Scorn, how you doing? I've been watching Night Gallery, almost done with season 2. Been enjoying it a lot. Wow, it's been a long time since I've seen Night Gallery. I usually throw on Twilight Zone this time of the year, but yeah, it's been a long time since I should rewatch Night Gallery. I'm sure I'd probably love it. I remember liking it. Probably since like college. I don't think I've seen it. I gotta rewatch that. But all right, so on today's stream, what do we got? Well, we got some new movies come up. We're in October right now. And we are just getting to the start of award season here. We're coming up on and it's really going to kick off, for me at least, next week when we have the Twin Cities Film Festival here in Minnesota. So that's usually when we get a lot of films coming in, and I'm actually going to try to cover as much of that festival as I can. There's a few screenings that I'm not going to be able to make it to or get around to covering. In particular, I really wanted to cover Good Fortune because I know a lot of people are looking forward to it. You know, it's a Keanu Reeves film, but it took precedent. It was either that or Hamnet, and you know I want to see the next Chloe Zhao movie, so I just had to go with Hamnet. But I'm also going to be covering Begonia, so it's all going to kind of work out. But before we get to that, we got to cover the latest films that have come out. So we're going to cover Roofman, a weird true story about a man who infiltrated a Toys R Us, starring Channing Tatum. We'll also be talking about The Smashing Machine, the latest film from Benny Safdie of Uncut Gems fame, starring Dwayne Johnson in a very unconventional role for Johnson. We'll also be talking about VHS Halloween, the 8th film in the horror anthology found footage format of VHS, which I always look forward to every Halloween, so we got to cover it, obviously. And then, as an extra treat, we'll also be covering some smaller films like Eleanor the Great, directed by Scarlett Johansson, which stars June Squibb as the role of an elder trying to fake being a Holocaust survivor. And we'll also cover Shane Black's latest I almost said anime. It's an action film. The latest action crime caper from director Shane Black of the Nice Guys fame. So, some pretty big films coming up here, some pretty big directors. So, as we get into award season, a lot is going to be covered here. It's just going to be like, there's a lot of reviews today. There's way more here than I usually do, and it's going to blow up. And it's going to be films that are not going to be coming out until much later this year or even next year. So if you want to stay up to date on the latest films, as well as like the top ones that are going to be like awards worthy this year, you're gonna want to subscribe to this channel. You're gonna want to keep up to date on the latest movies here. In particular, Roofman is not coming out until. Actually, it did come out just a few minutes ago in some parts of the world, but it will be debuting officially tomorrow. So be sure to subscribe for the latest ones. All right. So let's get the credits out of the way here. And also be sure to check out the Patreon if you want access to early video essays as well as my movie history books. There. I got all this ETA out of the way. Read some of the chat here. Let's see. I think my favorite episode so far is a question of fear with Leslie Nielsen. Leslie Nielsen, it's always so fascinating to see him when he's not in a comedic role and like when he's like more horror based and straight drama type stuff. Like there is, it's surprising. Like, you know, before like Police Squad took over for him, that there were like some like accomplished roles for him before. Like what was it? I almost said Fantastic Planet, but that's the sci-fi animated film. For Forgotten Planet, I think is the one. Let's see. Westy says, "Whoa, I just had two." Okay. Others are The Return of the Sorcerer with Vincent Price, and the Lovecraft adaptations. I imagine so, probably. Oh god, I'm gonna have to check that out. I think it's who was streaming that? Was it like I I think Paramount has the rights, don't they? So the Paramount or Sony? I'll check into it. All right, let's get into Roofman here. And let me get the notes up here. Get some water so we can... All right. Okay. Here we go. With Roofman here. Just had to get my bearings here. Okay. Here we go with the review of Roofman in 3, 2, 1. So Roofman is a crime comedy directed by Derek Cianfrance, who, he kind of done some art house stuff like Blue Valentine and stuff like that. And here he tries to frame like a little bit of a silly and sympathetic story for the true life story of Jeffrey Manchester. So Jeffrey Manchester, based on this true story here, and they do show some news footage at the end to kind of so you can compare. I always like when biopics do that. They have like the footage at the end so you can compare a little bit. So this was based on a true story about a criminal who would rob a whole bunch of McDonald's by just coming in through the roof. He would just cut a hole straight through the roof, drop down inside, steal from the safe, and was a very much like acted like a gentleman thief. He knew how to like treat the people that he was robbing from. So he was very clever like that. He was so clever, in fact, that even when he got caught and was sent to prison, he found a way to escape. And after he escaped, he ended up finding a safe refuge in a Toys R Us and hiding out there. So, this is the type of story where it's like, wow, it's a very wild, true crime type story. And it seems like, for a guy hiding out in a Toys R Us, you could have a lot of fun with that concept. You could frame it, as a little bit of like an isolation story. You could draw from like the humanity of the character, and you could point out some of the silliness in that scenario. And I think a good choice for the actor that they got for this role is Channing Tatum. I think Tatum does have a kind of a natural flow for comedy where it doesn't feel like he has to try too hard. But what I do appreciate about Derek's direction here is that he actually manages to give like Tatum a very like meaty emotional role. Like there are scenes that are genuinely tragic. Like this is a veteran who doesn't feel like he has a place in the world. Like he feels like he's losing touch with his family. He's separated from his daughter. His wife looks down on him, and he just feels like after being sent to prison, like he's lost everything and just is struggling to make ends meet at that point. So you really feel for him, that it kind of makes it a little bit hard to appreciate the absurdity of his situation, especially when he's been given the side eye by his friend of Steve, played by Lakeith Steinfeld, which is pretty much he's doing the same role he always does, but just kind of like more of a casual observer who occasionally gets involved here and there, and he's kind of bookended for most of the film. And I think, like, sure, like, and the first act, yes, you do get some funny bits where he's in the Toys R Us, he's trying to narrowly get around cameras, he's living on a diet of M&Ms, he's living behind displays, he's relying on all the products inside the store. And, that's how the film has kind of been marketed. And it's pretty funny for the first act. But then, you start questioning, okay, where is this going? What are you going to do with this material to make me care about this character more? Because if it was even just like 90 minutes, like the film runs over 2 hours, but if it was just 90 minutes of this, it feels like it would wear thin pretty quick. And thankfully, they do find more to do with the character. In particular, he finds a romance with one of the employees of Lee Wainscott, played here by Kirsten Dunst, and she's just like the perfect woman. She works really hard. She's nice to the other employees. She's a single mother just struggling to make ends meet with her 2 daughters. She helps out at the church. She runs toy drives. She's such a devoted and wonderful woman that, it's understandable why Jeffrey would make a play for her, would risk his safety of being on the lam to just, try to see if there's something there. And he kind of more or less kind of falls into that relationship. It starts off with him just kind of being a little bit interested in the toy drive, trying to do something nice, and then he just kind of falls into that relationship. And that relationship kind of occupies the entire second act of the film, because at that point, like, the film kind of recognizes that, look, there is something between Channing and Kirsten that maybe we should explore this. Maybe we should, have some more scenes of chemistry between the two of them. And it's nice. There definitely is something there, but even Jeff forgets that he's supposed to be, maintaining a low profile and that he has to try to find a way to escape. And it just kind of feels like the entire second act, like it just feels like it's trying to be a romantic comedy, and a very like sentimental romantic comedy. Like there's barely any danger in it throughout. That even with like the imposing Toys R Us general manager played by Peter Dinklage, who's just such a cartoonish dick. Like he's like the worst boss you could work for. He's egotistical. He makes very inappropriate jokes. You can't wait for Jeff to get some type of revenge on him, and he gets a little bit of revenge on him here and there. He kind of like messes with the schedule. He tries to like stick up for. He tries to like encourage some employees to kind of stick up for themselves, and he does kind of have a little bit of a crescendo when he finally, kind of humiliates this guy in a little bit of an indirect way. But much like Lakeith's character, he is also kind of like bookended in between this kind of romantic comedy that is focused on. And I wouldn't mind that so much. I wouldn't mind like the detour from the crime comedy aspect, except it rarely feels like the romance is building on anything. Like there's some nice scenes between like Tatum and Dunst and sorry, but yeah, like there's some nice moments between chaining it. There's some nice moments between Tatum and Dunst that they're nice together, but it rarely feels like they're building. Like it's just like, oh, this is a cute moment. Okay, I'd like to see where else their relationship could go, but it's like, okay, it's building on more of the same stuff as they get into like the Christmas season, so they got a little bit of a Christmas theme here, and yeah, Jeff starts questioning his motives a little bit, but it always felt like there were two different modes to this film. It's either Jeff, feeling like an isolated mess and just being, feeling like he's abandoned by the American system, and then when he's around Kirsten Dunst's character, he's just so energetic and happy and just like the best guy ever. It feels like he's in a completely different movie at that point. Like I said, it's like okay, here's the crime comedy portion and here's the romantic comedy portion, and there's a huge tonal shift between them that by the time you get to the third act, where Tatum needs to get all this money to get out of Dodge as quickly as he can, you're like, oh right, this is supposed to be the story about a criminal, and yeah, we kind of gotta like wrap this up. And that's such a frustrating aspect of this film, because Channing Tatum is really good in this role. I think that the director here finds something that you don't see out of a lot of actors in this type of role. But it always felt like the film was just spinning its wheels with fun stuff to do with the character and the scenario, and never really building on anything or exploring anything. Like there's a lot to explore there. A veteran struggling for work, feeling that he's abandoned, that he has to go around the American system just to make ends meet and get some money, and fall in love, and how he feels like he wants like some redemption with this family, that he wants like a second shot at, because it feels like his other family has abandoned him. So like, okay, here's a chance for me to reattain something that I felt was taken away from me, and and explore how that might only be able to last for so long. But even then, you kind of got to appreciate it. There are so many angles to explore, and yet it only feels like it's finding the fun aspects of this type of story. Like, oh, here's the funny stuff he can do at a Toys R Us. Here's the fun stuff he can do when he's hanging out and having sex with Kirsten Dunst's character. Here's the funny stuff he can do with playing pranks on Peter Dinklage's Toys R Us general manager. Not bad stuff, but I feel like you need something more. This film runs over 2 hours, and it never felt like there was momentum here. It always felt like just, okay, here's a bunch of weird and wild stuff that happened. Kind of crazy, right? And I mean, it's so frustrating because Jeff is a very likable character. You want to see him as this guy who's not trying to be like an evil criminal who deserves all this prison time that he's been granted, which I thought it was fascinating how at the end of the film they bring up how he made several other attempts to escape from prison. I feel like there's some more fun stuff you can do with that. but it rarely feels like, it just feels like they're scratching the surface here. It just feels like there's a distance between the reality that you could explore here and the kind of like fun, giddy nature and the melodrama that you could evoke from Jeff in this type of scenario. So I really want to like Roofman because there are some fun scenes. There are some neat little jabs here. There's some funny little moments where like there's a naked Channing Tatum running around Toys R Us trying to get away from a screaming Peter Dinklage. Like stuff like that was fun. And I wanted to see like where else the film could go past that point, but it never really does. So it's like it's a film with a lot of potential, and it never feels like it's living up to those expectations. So yeah, Roofman, it has its moments, and it's pretty neat. It's pretty funny, and it's pretty romantic here and there, but it doesn't have enough. It feels like it needs something more to warrant it being this long and exploring this true story and this character. So yeah, it's really a disappointment for Roofman, because I do think this is one of the better Channing Tatum roles. So Roofman will be playing in theaters this weekend, if you would like to check it out. I think for some people, if you just like Channing Tatum and Peter Dinklage, there might be enough here just to recommend on that alone, you know. Okay, let's go to the chat here. Let's see. I never been here. I like the Fritz the Cat video a lot. Oh, thank you, Westy. XJ Zana says, today would have been John Lennon's 85th birthday, so I decided to watch the 2009 biopic Nowhere Boy. How did Sam Taylor Johnson go from directing a great film like that to 50 Shades of Grey? You know, you'd be surprised. Like there are, this is a perfect example with Roofman. You know, I actually really love Blue Valentine, but that was over a decade ago. And now he's onto stuff like Roofman. And what was that? The place of that? What was that one film he did? The Place in the Pines, something like that. I remember liking that one. I wasn't in love with it, but yeah, you'd be surprised. In fact, there are actually a few other films from some good directors on here that might surprise you with how disappointing they are. Talbert Tran says, just watched Tron Ares today, and my God, was so astronomically boring, but at least Nine Inch Nails soundtrack was great. I feel it should bring some red flags whenever Jared Leto stars in your films. Not even that, like, there are so many red flags about that film, like, because wasn't there, like, they digitally put in Mr. Beast into that film? I know he only has, like, cameos and small stuff, but even when he's there, it sours you. And I think, I only read about it briefly, but there was a team up with Grok for Tron Ares. Just like, I don't know how many more red flags you can just stumble into. Like, it feels like this film just fell on every mine it could find, if only, I guess, to gain more attraction for it. Which is why I was so hesitant to review it. In fact, I overted it for like a different film. So yeah, I'll probably see it eventually, but yeah, there's nothing that I'm really looking forward to in that film. Keishan says, also Perfect Blue is getting a new 4K release. I saw that, and in fact, I saw that it was actually doing pretty well at the box office for its theatrical release, which I'm very excited to see this very old anime film. People still have interest in it, which I'm glad. I mean, it feels like a lot of that out of all of Satoshi Kon's films, like, it feels like Paprika gets a lot more attention, I think, and maybe a little bit of Tokyo Godfathers in the past few years, but I'm glad that people are coming back to Perfect Blue with a nice especially with a nice 4K release coming out. The Place Beyond the Pines, yeah, that's the film I was thinking of. Unlethal Condiment says Grok is in the AI. Yes, that Grok. Elon Musk's Grok. That's what it is. Ugh. Dog with the funny hat said, hey, what's up? Not much. What's up with you? Scorn says, sadly learned Deathstalker isn't coming to any theaters near me. Oh, no. Damn. I got to check back in with Shout, because I have not heard if I'm going to get a screener for Deathstalker. I hope I do. I hope they haven't pulled it from release. As far as I know, they haven't. but I haven't heard back from them yet. I'm hoping I will. I'm hoping, just because like award season coming up, so a lot of screeners are gonna run across my desk, and I don't want that one to get lost in it. Fortunately, it's worse than Grok. Much worse. Okay. Next up is the Smashing Machine. All right, let me get the notes up here. Move that screen over there. I'm getting a few lost frames, not a lot, but something to be knowing of. All right. Here we go with the Smashing Machine in 3, 2, 1. So the Smashing Machine is the latest. Choked on myself there. Retake in 1, 2, 3, go. So the Smashing Machine is the latest film from Benny Safdie, and it's a film about a UFC fighter. Now, I've never been all that big into wrestling or UFC fighting. Or martial arts in general. But that doesn't matter, because this film is directed by Benny Safdie, who has also directed Uncut Gems, a film about basketball, gambling, and jewelry, stuff I know nothing about, but man, did he make me care about that film. And he also made me appreciate just how great Adam Sandler can be as an actor. And that's very much the same thing he does with The Smashing Machine. He makes me care about the plight and the legacy of a martial artist played by Dwayne Johnson, which it's been a long time since I've seen Johnson in this type of role, where he's actually willing to go out of his usual comfort zone of a commercially safe hero. So the film follows the fighter of Mark Kerr, who's kind of like risen from the ranks to become like one of the best fighters in the world, and really wants to prove himself at this major championship going down in Japan. And while you can kind of see where this type of biopic is going. He struggles to maintain that level of focus. He takes steroids to enhance himself, and he struggles to maintain his relationship with his girlfriend, played by Emily Blunt, who plays the role of Dawn Staples. Now, it's here's the thing. This isn't so much like a sports biopic as much as it is trying not to fall into all like the cliches and the tropes of this type of film, because it feels like there are a lot of opportunities that you could just fall back on for this type of story. Like you can show the training montage, you can show the emotional fights that Mark has at home between him and Emily Blunt as he struggles to make this relationship work, but Benny managed to find the more interesting angles here. So whenever there's a scene of a fight, there's always something more going on besides the action in the ring. Like the perfect example is the opening fight, where Mark Kerr is fighting for a title, and while we're watching it, like there's a little bit of like a jazzy score on top of it, and there's narration from Dwayne Johnson as Mark Kerr, who's talking all about his philosophy about how he gets in the ring and how he feels like there's this very spiritual energy and connection that you have with a fighter, and it's. If you were to listen to this, just on its own, I'd be like, oh, okay, dude, you're an MMA fighter. This is your world. I don't clearly understand it, but you really have a deep connection to it. But I think framing it next to the fights that he's engaged with, you kind of understand that mindset of this type of character. Because what I think is more interesting about Mark is that this is a guy who's so focused on winning and keeps that winning within the ring. Like he basically, like at one point, a reporter asks him, like, look, what happens if you lose? And he says, look, I don't want to put that in my head. Like, I'm only focused on winning. But okay, yeah, but seriously, what if you lose? And he's like, I don't know. I haven't thought about that. And that's something like, I think that's terrifying, is that he's going to lose. And I think that type of mindset is interesting because that permeates not just to him focusing as a fighter, but also also just focusing as a human being, because the more fascinating angle with the drama is how he interacts with Dawn and tries to like not fight. He basically like he wants to make this relationship with Dawn work, but she feels like he's putting too much distance between her. She's very she wants him, and she's very like emotionally needy, and when she feels like she is not more within his life, that that she just wants to like fall into drugs and drinking, something that Mark tries to steer away from at one point. You always feel like there's this avoidance of conflict for Mark, and I think that this philosophy is actually kind of spelled out for him when he ends up going to the doctor to see if he can get some more steroids. And he ends up talking to a young child who wants him to sign an autograph. And while he's signing it, he says like, okay, look, but no fighting, all right? I know you like what I do in the ring, but don't fight in real life, okay? And it seems like kind of like an empty phrase to say, like just kind of like as a safety, like, okay, kids, like, yeah, I know you like my fighting, but don't replicate it, all right? But no, he actually kind of has this mindset where he's like, I don't want to fight. There are a lot of scenes where Dawn kind of like invites this heated debate, and Mark just doesn't want to engage with it. Even when he's caught with drugs and stuff like that, he doesn't want to throw a fight. He doesn't want to throw a fist. He doesn't want to engage in conflict with the woman he loves, because he doesn't want everything to come crashing down. He doesn't want to view a defeat both in the ring and in his relationship. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that he can't avoid. It's one of those. It's basically the story of Mark trying to learn how to accept defeat, to realize that he's not going to be able to win every battle, that he's not going to be able to make every relationship work, that he's not going to maintain certain bonds. And it's a very hard thing to accept. It's basically it's a role of humility. And I think it's very fascinating to see Dwayne Johnson in this type of role too, because there are a lot of shots that I found fascinating where it's shot from behind. Like when he's talking on the phone trying to get drugs, it's right over the shoulder in the car, or right after he's lost a fight, we follow him into the elevator, and it's him from behind. You just see his back's to the camera, and he's just stressing out, like, how did I get here? What happened? And you don't see his face. And I think just not seeing Johnson in that, just, seeing him facing away from the camera, I thought was just an interesting choice. And I think, that then it forces, Johnson to make some more some interesting choices with how he's going to act both in and out of the ring, because, I mean, it makes sense to cast Johnson in this type of role as a MMA fighter, because you can believe him in that role. You don't have to like put in like the extra training or show more training montages to like showcase how, I get it. Dwayne Johnson's a fighter. He can play this role easily. And there's a similar sentiment with the people he surrounds himself with, like Mark Coleman, played by Ryan Bader, who is also very much a fighter. And also Bass Rutten, who actually plays himself in the film as one of the people who helps out Mark on his training at the gym. So there are very believable roles here where it's like, okay, I can believe that these guys are fighters, because they pretty much are. To one degree or another. So you believe the fighting scenes, and the fighting scenes, they're competent and they're shot well. And I love the fact that Benny has the confidence to throw some jazz on top of it, so that there's a little something more to explore than just the intensity and the driving nature. Like what about like the humanity and the spiritual angle that Mark Kerr keeps talking about? And I think it's fascinating how I don't think Benny quite explores as much of it as he could, but the effort that he puts into framing those scenes, I think, was very, very attractive and very intoxicating for this type of film. I do think it's a little bit uneven, especially with how it frames Emily Blunt's character. I think they kind of fall back on just making her more of a mess that Marker has to learn to let go of, which is, it's tragic, but I think it also kind of paints her a little bit too simplistic because we don't get to see much of her. In fact, most of the film is just seen from Mark Kerr's point of view, and we get a little bit, a few shades of the different characters here and there. Like we see a little bit of Mark Coleman at home and how he has a lot more worth fighting for, that you're kind of rooting for him in the big final fight. And Emily Blunt's character, there's only a few scenes where she's alone and feels isolated, or is getting drinks with friends where she feels like she's more comfortable instead of being around her husband, who is very, who struggles emotionally and has problems with addiction, and he's trying his best, but basically he can't be enough for her. And I think the film, I think the film could benefit from being a little bit longer and exploring a little bit more of those characters, just so that there's more dimension instead of just, having Mark Kerr like always in the spotlight, which you're kind of used to for a Dwayne Johnson role, but also this is a very much different type of light to see Johnson in. So in terms of being like the story of a UFC fighter, I was actually rather intrigued how much Benny Safdie made me care about this character. Especially, I think it was an interesting choice by the end of the film to show the real Mark Kerr just shopping for groceries, not at the gym, not not working out or not jogging, just being an average person. And I don't think it quite. I didn't feel like it quite worked for me, but I get the juxtaposition that Benny's going for here, and I very much appreciate it. I feel like he's actually trying to toy around with the sports biopic genre and not just deliver a standard type of film. There are a lot of great scenes. There aren't as many scenes that are going to stick with me as much as like Uncut Gems. But there's enough here where I think that I cared about Mark Kerr, and I was sympathetic to his plight, and I wanted to see where he was going with this. I do think Benny did a fantastic job making this a very relatable, human and flawed character, and didn't just make him, just a tough guy who trained and just went through all the standard motions of a sports biopic. Like, let's put it this way. There is a training montage in this film, but it's set to Frank Sinatra, and it's a choice. I didn't think it worked as well as it could have, but I appreciate the effort here, and I really loved seeing Dwayne Johnson in this type of role where he was a lot more vulnerable, and there was a lot more demanded out of him instead of just like the physicality, instead of just being able to fight people in the ring and make it look convincing. Of course it's convincing with Dwayne Johnson, but making him seem as a more fully realized character instead of just a standard athlete who struggles with drugs, struggles with relationships, and struggles with training to like be the best that there is, and struggling with defeat as well. All the, typical motions for that type of film. But you know what? Benny made one of the more unorthodox type of sports biopics. So yeah, The Smashing Machine, I was surprised by how much I really enjoyed this Dwayne Johnson sports biopic. So The Smashing Machine, I think, should be in a few theaters for a little while. Let's see. Read through some of the comments here as well. Are you planning on doing a K-pop Demon Hunters review? Here's the thing. Dog with a funny hat. I actually did a review back in one of my live streams here. I just haven't edited it and put it into its own video. But if you do want to hear my thoughts, I believe it's back about 2 or 3 live streams back. I did review it. You should be able to find it in the titles if you search for it. So if you are curious about my thoughts on K-pop Demon Hunters, you can find it in one of the live streams I've done. You can also find a written review on my website if you're curious. So, let's see, what is K-pop Demon Hunters? Sounds a little ridiculous. It's a very ridiculous. It's a very silly musical animated film. A lot of people have been loving it just because it has catchy K-pop songs, and yeah, it very much lives up to the hype. It is one of those films where it debuted early summer, I believe it came out, and then it really gained momentum that by the time it hit theaters in August, for like sing-alongs, I realized I had to cover it. So yeah, and it's a very fun film. I really do love it. I love the effort they put into the exaggerated animation. The songs are catchy, and the exaggerated features on the characters are just funny. It's a very fun animated film. Talbot Dan says another aspect I loved about the Smashing Machine. God, I'm already losing my voice here. Is that it's shot and looks like a 2000s documentary. Then again, I haven't seen the original documentary, but watching this, I'm kind of eager to see it. God, I should have mentioned that in my review too, but that's another thing I do appreciate about Safdie's work, is that they're really good at framing very recent history. Because Uncut Gems was meant to take place in 2012. And that film came out in 2019. So they're trying to frame something that's very recent, but they actually do a pretty good job trying to frame like 2012 and that aspect. And they do a good job with the Smashing Machine, making it feel like it takes place in the late 90s as a bit of like a 2000s documentary. In fact, I think there actually is a documentary called The Smashing Machine on Mark Kerr, which I have not seen, and I'm kind of curious to see it, just to see how it stacks up with what Benny did. So is it just me, or did The Smashing Machine feel reminiscent of The Last Showgirl? It does, actually, yeah. It very much is like one of those, like, like this is like this guy's last shot at maintaining a relationship and, doing what he loves. It's very much like, like The Last Showgirl, just, like one last effort to do something that you love and feel like an era is coming to an end. So yeah, very, very much like The Last Show, which for people who haven't seen it, if you really liked Pamela Anderson in The Naked Gun, and you want to see her, and you're curious to see what she's like in a more dramatic role, you need to see The Last Showgirl. It is so damn good. Let's see. Unlethal Condiment says, I don't know, never watched either movie. Okay. Oh my goodness. And we got 2 more reviews to get through. Can I make it? Let's see if I can. One moment here. I gotta clear my... There we go. I hit the wrong mic there. Okay. I just realized I turned off the alert box. The alert box should be back on now. Okay. All right. Now, let's move on to VHS Halloween. My goodness. Man, I gotta have some tea after this. I am... God, my throat is killing me. It's not even like sore. It's just like I can feel like just my voice going out. Which has happened before. It's happened a few times when I've been at Anime Detour, which I will be going to next year if anyone's curious. All right. So here we go. With VHS Halloween, the review in 3, 2, 1. So VHS Halloween is the 8th film in the VHS anthology horror series. And, it feels like, because like the last few VHS horror films have been coming out around Halloween, so it's become a little bit of a Halloween tradition at this point. And, it was only a matter of time before we got to a Halloween-themed VHS film. We've had we've had Beyond, which was science fiction. We've had 99, which is framed in 1999. We've had 85. We had 94. So now we're getting to more of the more of a general theme. So Halloween seems like a pretty easy theme to go with, and for the most part, I feel like this film works for what it's trying to explore with these found footage horror films set around Halloween. In the ranking of VHS horror films, I would say this ranks somewhere in the middle. I felt like there was a good mix of different ideas in all these shorts, and there wasn't a short I felt was particularly terrible, but also not one that I felt was really great. There's some really good ones here, some really great ideas, but it always felt like there was a little something missing here. And I think that's only because we're so far into like the VHS franchise at this point that I'm a little bit more scrutinizing. So I've kind of like raised the bar a little bit, between the ones I love, like VHS 2 and VHS 99 and 85. I really love those ones because like there are ones I don't like in those segments, but there are ones that I absolutely love, and that's kind of usually how I grade these type of films. So the framing device for the Halloween, for VHS Halloween, is called Diet Phantasma, and I do kind of appreciate the frankness of these segments, these connecting bits here, which is just like it's just a series of people being tested to try out this new diet soda that's supposed to have literal ghosts in it. And every time they let a test subject drink it, something horrible happens. Like the can will eat them, or it'll crush them, or it'll cut out their throat, or tentacles will come out. And that's pretty much all those segments are. And I do have to appreciate the fact that is what they set out to do with Diet Phantasma. It's nothing more than just a series of people getting killed by soda, which is fine. I do like the fact that they're not trying to like build to something much bigger here. It's just a series of kills, and they're pretty competent and exciting kills. You do kind of question a little bit how it's supposed to be like an internal study that is being filmed secretly, and there's multiple camera angles. So as long as you're not willing to question that, it's a fine framing device. Now, the most controversial of these segments is the first one that they have after the opening bit, which is it's called Coochie Coochie Coo, and it's basically a haunted house film, except the haunted house has a milking mommy and adults in diapers, and it's very much I know a lot of people are going to approach the segment in this way. That's like, okay, this is clearly someone's fetish that they're turning into a horror film here, and I think, depending on where you fall on, that fetish of like, of milking boobs and people in diapers and acting like babies, you are either going to love this segment or you're going to hate it. As for me, I felt I was a little bit torn. I was somewhere in the middle there because, yes, on one level, it is very disturbing and off-putting if, you don't like that type of concept of seeing like, adults acting like babies. And especially like there's some very creepy stuff involving breast milk and gross pumps and stuff like that. So if that's not your jam, you're probably going to end up skipping this segment. And I was a little bit off-put by it, but at the same time, I do like the fact that this is a haunted house segment where the nightmarish monster here is not trying to kill people. The nightmare monster here is a woman who feels like her goal in life is to be a mother to all these like adults who come into her domain, and she basically doesn't want to kill them. She wants them to become a part of her family. So I did think that was an interesting angle. I just don't think it was as explored as much as it could be, because most of the film is just, running around the house and looking at creepy stuff like, oh, here's some gross toys, and oh, here's like an ancient breast pump, and here's some photos telling us a little bit here and there. It felt a little bit too standard for an idea that could be something a bit more. So I did appreciate the fact that it's very off-putting and disturbing. And I think for some people that'll be like the make or break moment for them very early. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there's a much different tone with the segment that follows it, called Ut Supra Sinc Infra, which is a Spanish language short about a Halloween group who goes to this spooky place, and there's this haunted phone where if you recite the title of this segment, you will get a phone call. You'll basically become possessed, and you'll start pulling out people's eyeballs. Now, the idea itself is not not all that intriguing, I guess, but the presentation is beautiful. I love how it's framed between like the segment of the Halloween party coming to the phone and the police investigating the murders who are led to the phone, and you're watching the same thing happen again from different angles. So there are some very fascinating shots here, especially the scenes where all the police officers are just being held down and you're slowly watching, you know, the possessed figure run around and slowly pull out people's eyeballs. It's like it's very gruesome, very gory, and very disturbing, and it's expertly shot. So it's one of the cases where I didn't really like the idea, but it's shot very well. So I very much appreciated the director putting a lot of effort into the haunting nature of pulling out eyeballs and making people float in the air, and making people become possessed, and just framing a disturbing little phone. It's pretty good. It's a very good exercise in supernatural gore. Now, where I might be a little bit controversial here is how I didn't really favor the segment fun size, because I do think it's a very good idea. This is a segment where the concept is that there's a weird candy bowl set out, and it says only take one. And it's all these like weird candy that's shaped like body parts, and it's like it's all chewy and gross, and it's candy that people have never heard of. And so there's this very obnoxious group of young people who are filming everything, and they go to check out these candies, and they end up taking more than one. And when you do that, the bowl literally sucks you inside into this weird candy factory where people are chopped up and turned into candy. Not a bad idea. I really like this concept. I'd love to see where it can go. And unfortunately, it doesn't really go anywhere all that unexpected. Like, they clearly put a lot of work into making a very like creepy antagonist who looks like this very disturbing candy king type character who, you know, he's got a very creepy smile and he kind of like bleeds Skittles and all that. And his little machine that he uses for putting people on conveyor belts and chopping them up and basically turning them into like chocolate coated candy, I thought was very gross and very gory and very disturbing. But unfortunately, this is a segment where it feels like they're constantly, you know, gawking and pointing at everything, like saying like, look, oh, what's happening? Oh, their body's getting chopped up. Oh my God, look, they're turning them into chocolate. Look how much detail they're putting into the caramel and how they cut off this guy's dick and now it's covered in chocolate. Isn't that gross? It's like, yes, it is gross. It is disturbing. Do the annoying characters have to keep pointing it out every 2 seconds? It's like, can we just allow ourselves to just be engrossed in the grossness just for a little bit? Just because like there's an overarching plot about a loveless proposal here, about a fiance couple that aren't really in love with each other. And it really didn't go anywhere for me. Like I can kind of see how it's meant to be like cut off as a moment where they don't really have faith in each other, but it just kind of gets lost in all like the spooky candy factory theatrics that come about with it. Little bit of a disappointment because I think this was from the directors of was it Too Many Cooks, that very disturbing segment from Adult Swim. So I had a little, I think I had too high hopes for this because it's a very good idea and I like the way it's staged. I really didn't like the characters and how much they kept gawking at all the... It felt like they were trying to break the fourth wall constantly, because at one point they reference how, oh, we have all these cameras, because it's a joke about how, oh, in those found footage horror films, everyone's filming everything constantly, and we have all these cameras for different angles. Isn't that ridiculous? Like, okay, I get it. Can you have a little bit of faith in your segment here? Now, I'll skip to the last segment here just because I want to save my favorite for last here, because like the other one called Home Haunt felt like more of a ride. It's a segment where there's a haunted house that's put on by this father-son duo, and they come across this spooky record they decide to play when they have their annual haunted house walkthrough. And when they play it, all the attractions come to life. So everything that you would expect happens with a lot of quality gore placed into it. Like vampires come to life and they start ripping off flesh, like they start tearing limbs off of the unfortunate people who enter. There are spooky like bedsheet ghosts, but the bedsheets will like they'll wrap themselves around you and basically turn you into bloody chunks. So, okay, that's pretty good. There's a witch that burns off skin. There's a hooded torturer guy who will decapitate people. All a great gore and stuff like that. But the film kind of becomes a little bit more of a ride. Where I was appreciating more of the theatrics than I did, caring about any of the unfortunate victims. So it's one of those. I was very torn on that. Like, I appreciate the effort put into the gore and the special effects and just how quick it is with the pacing. But it came off more like a ride. Where it's just like, oh, here's a cool series of kills and little more than that. It felt like it was just kind of like speed running through a whole bunch of different like haunted house scenarios. Now, my favorite segment here is one that I think the reason that I like this segment the best is because it doesn't involve anything supernatural or paranormal. It's a segment called Kid Print, which is all about this electronics store that films children so that there's something for the cops to go on if a child goes missing. And a lot of parents have decided to do this for this Halloween in 1992 suburbia because a lot of kids have gone missing and they're very concerned about, what serial killer is on the loose. So they film all these segments where, the kids, they stand in front of a lineup or, they can show the height, they can talk so you can hear their voice, they can list like their interests and their personalities so that people can recognize them if they see them in public or something like that. So very, very relatable aspect for that era. But also, like, the big reveal here is that without giving away the big twist, it's basically the adults who scrutinize over wanting to maintain security over their children that end up being like the real culprit here, and the ones that are torturing children and using the electronic store to their advantage of basically like torturing kids without anyone else knowing about it, and just relying on relying on like the manipulation of video to kind of to let the killer get away in the end. So it's very disturbing, especially for the scenes that they show of like tortured children's and like the way tortured children and the way that that one unfortunate adult gets brutalized by this killer who and I love when they reveal the killer, because like the killer does have like a motive here and a very disturbing past, but it's very subtle. Like there's never a moment where they clearly outline it like, okay, here is the killer's history and past. Like they always keep it just enough of an enigma so that you're creeped out and you're fascinated and you kind of want to know more, and you're almost like frustrated that you don't get more of it, and you're like wait, this guy is disturbing. It's like, why would he do this? Like, I got a little bit of it, and I kind of want to see more of him. So I'm almost kind of like fascinated to see if they'll if they'll kind of expand Kid Print into more of like a feature film, or if it'll return for another VHS segment, because I'd really like to see more of that concept. So yeah, I really did love Kid Print. So overall, there wasn't a short here that I hated. Like I was very disappointed, I think, in fun size, and I was very much on the fence about Coochie Coochie Coo. But for the most part, these were all pretty good segments here. So that's why I say it's kind of in the middle here. There wasn't like a standout one that made me just fall in love with it. Usually it feels like there's one I really don't like, and there's one that I absolutely love in these VHS segments. And it wasn't really the case here. It was kind of like a very even mix. It's like it's a very, it's, for lack of a better term, it's like it's a trick or treat bag where it's like, okay, there's some fairly good stuff in here. This is all stuff I'll eat. There's nothing I'm going to throw out, but it's nothing I'm all that excited here for. So yeah, it's fine. It's it's not the best of the VHS franchise, but it's still pretty fun, and I always look forward to these films every Halloween. So yeah, VHS Halloween gets the job done of a few really good found footage horror films, even if they're not as great as the past VHS films. I think for Kid Print alone, this is worth watching. So yeah. So yeah, VHS Halloween is currently playing on Shudder. So if you want to watch it right now, go on over to Shudder and give it a watch. Let's see. And I'm probably sure I got like a lot of comments after that. So let's see. Let's read a few here. Let's see. Scorn says VHS 99 is still my favorite out of all of them. It's a top contender. I think it's really hard to beat VHS 2 for me. VHS 2, I think that the cult segment is one that I can't stop thinking about. That the alien segment, I really like the way that was shot too. But 99 is right up there. That's like my number 2 if I were to like rank them. And I think a big part of that is just, as someone who lived through that era, who was a teenager in 1999, like that really appealed to me. And I felt like they really got that era right. There were a lot of there are so many films, especially like films like Y2K, that are trying really hard to replicate the 90s, and they fail. They fail so hard. It always feels like Gen Z trying to replicate what millennials went through. And I didn't feel that with VHS 99. I really felt like they grasped how to frame that era and then tell a story through it without just, being reliant on nostalgia. See, Unlethal Condiment says, my only exposure to the VHS franchise was through Dead Meat's Kill Count. It seems pretty interesting to me. They are. They are a lot of fun, and I think most of them are up on Shudder, if not all of them. Let's see. Squid Baby just entered the chat. Unlethal Condiment says, ew, that sounds disgusting. I'm assuming you're thinking of Coochie Coochie Coo, yeah. I think for sure a lot of people are going to be grossed up at Coochie Coochie Coo. Segment was icky, honestly. Yeah. And that's the thing, like, I don't mind if they're going to get icky and gross, because, the last thing I want from horror films is to be that desensitized where I don't care about it. And that was one of my fears with Fun Size. That kind of happened. Like, it was pretty gross, but once, they keep gawking at the chocolate covered brains and penises and balls and stuff like that, it kind of loses its luster. You're not as grossed out when, you see it enough times. And Coochie Coochie Coo did gross me out in a few segments. I was like, okay, that's great. I'm actually really disturbed. I'm very much haunted by that. That's great. I want that out of horror. I don't just want, standard gore and killing all the time, Unlethal Condiment says, I think I'm skipping that one if I watch it. Yeah, that's understandable. Unlethal Condiment says, does VHS have any VHS releases? They actually do. I believe the first and the second VHS, I do know, had special VHS physical releases where you could get them on VHS. I don't know if there's one for the third one, VHS Viral, and that's only because they tried to go like the viral video route with that one, and I don't really think that worked. That's probably my least favorite of all the VHS films, if I'm being honest. Like the first one and the third one are really rough. Those are really hard to get through. Because I really didn't like the segments in those. But once you get past that, the rest of the franchise is actually pretty solid. There's actually some really good segments in there. Let's see. The Scorin says, watching the body part candy, I was reminded of Willy Wonka's parody from Epic Movie. Kinda, yeah. He had to bring that up, didn't you? Scorn says, the kid segment felt almost like watching a snuff film. It was brutal. Yeah, it is. It is. And that's another reason I really love Kid Print. It is genuinely disturbing in the fact that it is a believable scenario in which someone who kidnaps and abuses and murders children would film sick shit like that. And it's very disturbing. These are all like really good aspects, and it's like I almost really want to rewatch VHS Halloween now, because there's a lot of really good moments. There's some moments that fell flat for me. I think I was a little bit bored during the Spanish language one, just because you can kind of see where it's going. The more that it goes along, you're just kind of like waiting for like the money shot to come up. So, but yeah, for the most part, it's fine. It's a good entry. Let's see. Felon says, hello. Hope folks are doing okay here. Hope y'all are too. Scorn says, Ozzy's Dungeon was the best with the love for the Nickelodeon game shows and the nods to the dark behind the scenes stuff. Yeah. That was a really great one. Yeah. If you grew up with like stuff like Double Dare and you want like a gross like Double Dare horror film in like the vein of like Saw, you need to check out that segment. That segment is from VHS 99 if you're curious. So yeah, that's I think that might be one of my favorite ones from '99. It's up there right along with the one with like the New Year's celebration where they get transported to hell. Just because I like the way that they frame hell in that one, but yeah. Ben Brenner says, "Happy early Halloween. Have you seen One Cut of the Dead?" I have. It's been about 4 years since I've seen it, but yeah, I remember loving it. I have not seen there was like a remake of it, I believe. Was it a French remake, I think? I have not seen the remake. I probably should. But yeah, One Cut of the Dead is a lot of fun. Scorn says, I think VHS Viral is universally considered the worst of the whole franchise. Oh, yeah. Especially the weird the framing device in Viral just sucks. It is so... You can feel the desperation of trying to, like, retool this franchise into be like kind of like a scary YouTube type deal, but it's just like, no, that ain't gonna work. And thankfully they didn't lean into that. Yeah, the franchise made a massive recovery after that. Unlethal Condom says, also on the topic of thinking, I was watching Full Metal Jacket with my dad, and it was amazing how much of the movie's messaging went over his head. Man, you're really not gonna be paying attention to that film to miss that stuff. Like, what does he take away from that film when Arlie Ermy gets killed in the first act, and how he gets killed? You don't think that says anything about war and serving in the military and how it kind of sucks, you know? Well, some people, some people don't think that much about movies, They just see it as mindless entertainment. They just turn it on. They like hearing Arlie Ermy scream at people. That's it, Unfortunately, which is why I try to do this YouTube channel and talk about a little bit more than that. Which is why I talk about weird stuff like VHS Halloween. Dog with a Funny Hat says, which Halloween VHS would you recommend to a person that never watched any of them? Oh, man. That ultimately depends on the type of person. Like, well, for one, you do not have to watch them in order. They're anthology segments, so it's like saying, oh, should I watch Twilight Zone in order? No, you don't have to. You can watch them in any order. I would say, well, like the one that won me over, but I've been watching it since it began. So like VHS 2 was the one that won me over, just because it was very shocking and disturbing with because it involved cults and aliens. But if you're more like a millennial and you grew up with stuff like Nickelodeon and Double Dare, I would say watch VHS 99. That's perfect. Or, even if this is just like your first time, I would say, yeah, just start with the recent one. Start with VHS Halloween. In fact, that might actually be a good one to start with, because once you start there, I think you can, as long as you avoid the first and the third one, you can basically move up from there. Because like everything after that is actually really good. Then you can kind of work your way backwards. Yeah, VHS Halloween is a good place to start. Any of them, I would say, yeah, Halloween 99 or VHS 2 would be good places to start. The best part of that 99 segment was where Betweenst to Hell was, it was directed by Joseph Winters, who made Deadstream. Yeah, I forgot about it. Deadstream was actually really good, yeah. Bit of an underrated one. Have you seen Anemone? Saw it this morning. Had a really hard time with the pacing. I have not seen Anemone yet, and I know I gotta see it eventually, but I'm regretting it just because I don't want to see Daniel Day-Lewis, being in such like a lackluster film, because I have heard that the film is really not that good. That it's not terrible, but it's not. It feels very. From what I've heard from other critics I've listened to, and the general consensus is that for being directed by Daniel Day-Lewis's son, it's very rough. It's a very, very rough start for him. So it's like, I kind of want to see it, but I'm just like, oh man, I don't want to be dismayed. Like I've been so used to seeing Daniel Day-Lewis in just amazing films that he's been in, like Phantom Thread and There Will Be Blood and The Age of Innocence and Beautiful Laundrette, just all these great films, and then to see me in something that's not that great, I know I'm gonna have to. So he's great, but it's so hard to watch. Yeah, I'd imagine he would be. Daniel Day-Lewis doesn't put in like terrible effort. Him, I'm not worried about. It's the direction of his son that I'm worried about. Because I'm like, oh man, I don't just want this to kind of just be like a case of like nepotism coming in here and doing a terrible job of making a film. From what I've heard, it's not that bad, but I'm just like, I don't know. I'll get around to it. I'm probably going to get a screener for it at some point. Which I have been starting to get. Screeners have been slowly coming in for award season. I just finally watched Bad Guys 2. I missed it in theaters, and I didn't miss much. Okay, where are we on to next? We're on to Eleanor the Great. I might have to speed run these, because I am losing my voice hardcore tonight. I got a little bit of a second wind while I was talking about Smashing Machine, but man, I gotta, especially come award season, I gotta have like tea and honey and cough drops down here. Keep this up. All right. All right, let's get to Eleanor the Great. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. So Eleanor the Great stars June Squibb as a 94-year-old woman. Man. See, I can feel losing it. All right. One more time. Take 2. All right. 3, 2, 1. So Eleanor the Great was directed by Scarlett Johansson and stars June Squibb as the 94-year-old Eleanor, who basically wants to try to find a way to gain attention and tries to find that by just lying. Just lying about, spinning tales and trying to make herself out way bigger than she usually is. Now, I'm a little bit conflicted on this role for June Squibb because I feel like this film is torn about whether it wants to make this character feel desperate or make her feel like a very cocky liar who has like a lot of like wry wit to her, because it fluctuates between those two levels of, having that tragic drama of getting older and trying to carry on a legacy and trying to find that humor of being a very feisty old woman. And it never feels like there's a perfect mixture of both. It always feels like it's trying to be like, okay, here's the funny segments and here's the serious segments. So like it starts off fun enough. You have Eleanor connecting with her best friend of Bessie, played here by Rita Zohar, who is a Holocaust survivor. And the two of them are just kind of like partners in crime. Like, Bessie has like a little bit of like, wit to her, but Eleanor will always try to like march her way through everything. Like if somebody is giving Bessie a hard time in the grocery store saying, well, we don't have any more pickles, like Eleanor will be the one to come up there and say, excuse me, young man, I've been here longer. I know what I'm doing. Why don't you go back and get them pickles? Not in that exact cadence, but still, she will kind of frame it that way. She'll also just kind of try to like stick up for Bessie. Like she'll just lie about trying to get her the best care in the hospital when she needs to go, and just trying to like, she can basically like spin yarns and kind of like talk up a storm. So when Bessie leaves her life, when Bessie passes on, Eleanor feels like she's lost a part of herself. And when she moves in with her daughter and her grandson, she just can't connect with them. Like her daughter is constantly busy. Her grandson is just a little bit distant, not completely distant, but distant in that way that's typical of grandsons. So Eleanor is craving something. She needs something more to do with her life, and she doesn't want it to be, you know, the typical retirement home life, or just feeling like that desperate old lady begging for attention, or just, you know, telling stories, the same stories over and over. So she tries to find that attention by essentially lying and telling the same story of Bessie as a Holocaust survivor. And this ends up attracting a lot of attention, especially from Lisa. Lisa's Eleanor's daughter. But this ends up getting her a lot of attention from this one young woman, Nina, played by Erin Kellyman, who is a college journalist who is fascinated with Eleanor and wants to learn more about the Holocaust. And even though Eleanor is essentially feeding her stories from Bessie, the two of them connect on a level where they, you know, like, there's a huge age gap between them, you know, college student and an elderly woman. But the connection they have, I think, is pretty neat. They do have some chemistry there between them, and they do have a nice focus on the aspects of what it means to grow up, and focus on tragedy and how to document it, and trying to basically find where the truth lies. Now, naturally, this type of film, it will end up, you know, of course, with Eleanor eventually spilling the beans. I mean, she can't keep doing this without gaining some amount of attention where somebody will check her on her facts and she'll get revealed as a fraud. But even when that happens, even when, like, the camera comes down, it always feels like the film is being a little bit too gentle and tender with this type of material, which is very frustrating for, like, a character like June Squibb, that a character that June Squibb can play, because as we've seen from films like Thelma, she can have a mouth on her. She can play a very feisty old woman that you kind of want to see more of that out of her, instead of kind of like the melodrama that this film falls back on. Like, this is a film where, when Eleanor is revealed to be a fraud for trying to pose as a Holocaust survivor, one of the people who discovers it is Nina's father of Roger, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, who basically, like, he thinks it's his job to report it on the news and basically reveal her as a fraud, but he tries to approach it from an emotional angle and relate to her, and says, you know, and he says this right on the news. He says, look, you know, she lied, but hey, you know, sometimes we lie just to, you know, feel something in our lives. And, you know, this doesn't feel like something you would say on the news. This feels like something you would say to friends, or, you know, in private. And it just, the way that it's talked about on the news, it comes off almost like a Lifetime movie that is evoking this type of melodrama. And it just makes you wonder, like, you know, if June Squibb's character of Eleanor could get away with this, with the mouth that she has in her, the mind boggles at what else she could get away with in this type of environment. And you shouldn't be thinking that. You should be thinking, like, okay, you know, it's just Eleanor getting attention here. But because the film does have this very uneven tone, especially with, like, the nonlinear aspects of Eleanor talking with Bessie about the Holocaust, it feels like there should be a little bit more heart here. It should not feel like melodrama, especially for, like, the material that it's evoking here. And it becomes, like, a little bit too tender with how it treats this elderly character, and treats aspects of growing up and being Jewish, that it becomes like, it feels like it's almost like borderline inappropriate for how, like, cautious it is to dig into, like, more into more, like, somber territory, which you feel like, you know, if you're gonna go that route, go all the way, you know, make it a little bit more discomforting and a little bit more tearful and emotional, instead of just, you know, making it resolve so simply just because you really like June Squibb. It's like, yeah, I like her too, but, you know, I want to see her do more, instead of just, you know, everyone just kind of like treating her with kid gloves when she doesn't clearly treat the rest of the world like that. So it's a frustrating film, because, you know, June Squibb is really, really great in this type of role, but it's a very uneven film and doesn't really explore as much as it should. It only feels like it feels like there's about, like, half a film that was made here, and the other half is just left on the cutting room floor, because you need more than just like June Squibb getting in like a few good wry jokes here and there, and then just delivering like a little bit of like melodrama for wanting attention. So yeah, Eleanor the Great is it's not that great. What more can I say than that? So Eleanor the Great, small film. It's probably playing in a few art house theaters if you can find it right now. Oh, see a dog with a funny hat. Thank you for stopping by. This is, I know like the stream's going on a little longer than it usually does, but we're almost done. There's one more. In fact, I forgot. Oh, actually, I forgot to make a card for it here. I'm gonna have to see if I can make one on the fly here. Hopefully I can. Yes, thankfully I can. All right. This last one is probably going to be very brief just because my voice is going out and there isn't a whole lot to say about it, unfortunately. All right. So here's Play Dirty. In 3, 2, 1. So Play Dirty is the latest crime comedy from Shane Black. And I don't know, like I expect a little bit more out of Shane Black after making such films like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys, like such great films that manage to, you know, weave together crime and comedy with, you know, just great dialogue and great performances. But Play Dirty, you can feel it trying to be that type of film, but just it can't make it work. And I think part of the problem with making this type of story is that, for one, it's based on some books, and for second, it stars Mark Wahlberg in the lead role of Parker, who plays this thief who's used to a life of crime and being deceived and trying to figure out who to trust. And Wahlberg, he's not really given much of a character here with Parker. He's mostly just performing the same type of bland action character he does every now and then, you know, and struggling to get in one-liners here. And there is like the ensemble also feels like it could be, they could have some funny moments with the other people he's working with here. Like Lakeith Stanfield is here as Grofield, who is a, you know, there's an aspect to him that's kind of interesting. Like he wants to put on a theater production and wants to use the money he gets from thieving to, you know, support the arts. So there's a little bit of an angle to him. It's not as explored as much as it could be. I mean, there is something to work with there when he's working on Heist, where he has to like put on a performance. So there's something interesting there. There is an untrustworthy character with Zen, played by Rosa Salazar. Not too shabby. You know, she's fine for wanting to be this character who has her own motives that she feels like that she has to deceive a lot of people. But then, you know, there's Keegan-Michael Key. He's, what can I say? Like he does what he always does. He always puts on a decently fun performance here. I did appreciate, you know, the antagonist here of Chukwudi Iwuji playing Phineas Paul, who's basically a snooty art dealer, and then you have Tony Shalhoub as Lanizi, a very hot-headed thief who isn't in the mood for any of Parker's antics. But again, these are all roles that you would expect them to play. And they just kind of go on autopilot, I think, mostly because this is a plot that is needlessly intricate. It spends a lot of time just showing characters deceiving each other and shooting at each other and accidentally shooting people that they didn't mean to, or shooting people just because they pissed them off. There's this whole deal with the corrupt country, but what it all boils down to is that this team needs to steal this giant piece of artwork. And it's all for the benefit of a certain country that's grown corrupt. That's all you really need to know about the plot. And in between that is a lot of dialogue that you can feel it's trying to be funny. It's trying to have like some interesting back and forth here. There's some bits like you can see the joke there. You can see how this could work. Like there's one bit about how, you know, there's this one guy they assaulted previously who they're trying to extract information from, and they're just like, like, you got to give us the info. It's like, no, I can't trust you. You guys you're going to throw me off the roof, aren't you? It's like, no, we're not going to throw you off the roof. We did throw one of your guards off the roof, though. We did that, but oh, you're not going to trust us now, are you? It's like, okay, not a bad scene, but you need to. There needs to be a little something more. There needs to be like an energy there, and it just doesn't feel like it is. It always feels like everybody is just kind of passively there to spout out the lines and just kind of, let the action carry the rest of the film. Because there are some genuinely thrilling sequences of like a train car going out the tracks, and Lakeith Steinfeld has to just like, barely avoid the train cars hitting him. Kind of thrilling if even though the CGI is kind of obvious. There is some switcheroos here, like when they try to like switch safes or deceive people there, which you expect out of a caper film. That aspect isn't bad. But the one aspect that got really draining for me was in the first act, where you have all these scenes where characters pull off a heist, and then a few of them will get shot and killed, and then they get away. But then one of them double crosses them and then kills a whole bunch of other people. And then, they catch up with that person, and then they kill some people they don't mean to. This is the type of film where somebody will say, kill me if you must. And then the other guy will just say, okay, and then kills them. And when you do that a few times, it's shocking and it's kind of unexpected and it's a little bit twisty. But when that just kind of becomes the norm, after like the third or fourth scene where I see people just randomly get gunned down because they feel like it loses its impact. It doesn't have the same shock value or twists, because that's the problem, where you have like a film where it's just all twists. You expect the twists, and it's not all that surprising the more that it goes along. And I think that's a big problem that a lot of capers in general have, and that's it's unfortunately what befalls Play Dirty, because there are aspects of this film where I feel like I should like it. You have Lakeith as a theater-loving caper, theater-loving thief. You have Chuck Woody as an eccentric art dealer who just gets very snippy and angry. You have Mark Cuban playing himself in a film where he gets gunned down, and you would think, okay, that should be a recipe for me liking this film. I should love the film on that degree, but it's just not enough here. The character dynamic is missing to make me care about this film, and it doesn't help that Mark Wahlberg's limp performance isn't really doing anything for me here to make me appreciate him as much as the scenes where he's trying to catch up with his getaway car by running through a suburban neighborhood a la Ferris Bueller's Day Off. There's an aspect missing there, especially coming from Shane Black. He's made really great crime comedies before, but it's not here. Like if like Nice Guys and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, those films were alive. They felt like they had a great dynamic. They had good back and forth. They felt believable. There were characters that you liked, that you want to hang out with. Play Dirty needs CPR. It's not functioning, and it just comes off like a typical commercial action caper, especially with Wahlberg in the lead. It has that flavoring of just bland all over us. Yeah, this is a very unfortunate misfire from Shane Black. So, Play Dirty is playing on Prime Video. So if you're a Shane Black completionist, you can check it out. But if you're not in the mood to see one of the weakest films he's directed, then probably stay away from this film. I didn't even really love Predator that much. Predator is a mess. It's goofy, it's dumb, it's stupid. But honestly, compared to Play Dirty, I kind of prefer his version of Predator, just because it is gleefully stupid, and it is like watchable for how stupid it is. Play Dirty just feels bland. It's like it's needlessly intricate. It's limp acting. It's just like the twist becomes so commonplace where you see it all coming, and I just wasn't having fun with it. It felt like I'm really gonna date myself here, but it felt like a very old film from the 90s called Mad Dog Time, which is a film where characters, it's a bunch of gangsters. It's a bunch of scenes where gangsters enter a room, they talk with each other, they sling back some insults, and then they shoot each other. And that's the entire progression of the film. Each scene, gangsters show up, gangsters talk to each other, they shoot each other, move on to the next scene. That's all it is. And that's very much what Play Dirty felt like. Let's see, Classic Luigi fan says, Play Dirty was such a disappointment, especially if you're a fan of the books the film was based on. I imagine the books are probably more fun, probably. I've never read them before, but they sound like they're just meant to be like, compelling capers that you're just, you're reading for the twists of it all, which to make it exciting, which sounds like an actual very fun read. So maybe eventually I'll check them out. All right. So let me get some water here and then we'll do a quick recap. I think my voice did recover there. I think I just had to clear it a lot more. But I'll be more prepared in the future. All right. So what did we review on today's stream? Well, we reviewed Roofman, starring Channing Tatum, in the true story of Jeff, the man who robbed McDonald's by coming in through the roof and who hid from the law inside a Toys R Us. It becomes a bit of a romantic comedy, and Tatum is really good in the role. It's one of his finer performances, but it does have an uneven quality in the tone that it establishes here, especially for all the material that it could explore, but simply doesn't, kind of relying on the melodramatic and the silliness of that type of scenario. I reviewed The Smashing Machine, the latest film from Benny Safdie, starring Dwayne Johnson in one of his better roles in the past few years. It's not Benny Safdie's best film, but I think it did make me care about a UFC fighter, and it was compelling to see Dwayne Johnson in a role where he is a lot more vulnerable and fragile, and not so much longing for a fight as he is trying to understand and avoid conflict. So yeah, very, very compelling film. Some great performances from Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt. I reviewed VHS Halloween, the 8th entry in the VHS horror anthology saga, and while not my favorite of the franchise, it does have some really good segments here about some decent gore with chopping up body parts into candy, and the best one is definitely Kid Print, which does focus on the terror of 1990s security. But also, fair warning on Coochie Coochie Coo. If you don't like breast milk and adult babies, probably skip that one. If that's not your bag, that'll probably disturb you a little bit too much. What else did I review? I don't have the title for it up, but I also reviewed Eleanor the Great, directed by Scarlett Johansson. A decent role for June Squibb, but it falls a little bit too much on melodrama to make you truly appreciate a character who is so desperate that she had to lie. And I reviewed Play Dirty, Shane Black's latest caper, which unfortunately comes off as commercially safe and forgettable as most of the capers that grace Prime Video. So, of all 5 films I reviewed, I'd say probably the best one is The Smashing Machine, if you're going out to the theater. So if you want to go out to the theater and have a good time, The Smashing Machine is a really good performance by Dwayne Johnson. And if you're staying at home, the best film you can watch there is VHS Halloween. You can check that out on Shudder, as well as the other VHS horror films, which if you have not checked out that series, which I found out that a lot of people for the first time are just now checking it out. It's a good time to check them all out. It can be a great little Halloween movie marathon of horror. Rob D says they actually got The Rock to act. It's amazing. That's the thing. Like this, Safdie is really good at that. He did it with Uncut Gems. He made Adam Sandler. Like, actors can be really good if you give them the right material. If you don't if they're not just going for safe commercial films, you can actually see some really good acting. There's a reason that Dwayne Johnson became a movie star, because he does have a charisma. He does have presence. It's just he needs the right film that can use it. And thankfully, The Smashing Machine is one of those. He does fantastic in that role. So, if you would like to stay up to date on the latest movies, be sure to, well, for one, like this video so that more people know about VHS Halloween and The Smashing Machine, but also subscribe so you can stay up to date on the latest films that are going to be coming out this award season. And we're going to be coming up on them quick here. Like in the next 2 weeks here, I'm gonna be blowing through a ton of films that are gonna be coming through Twin Cities Film Fest. So it is gonna be a gauntlet. It's gonna be an onslaught, and it's only gonna get worse from there or better depending on your perspective when all the screeners start flooding in from there. So if you want to stay up to date on the latest films we got coming up, what do we got coming up? We got After the Hunt, Begonia, Avatar, Fire and Ash, Wicked. I'm trying to think of like less commercial films. We do have like some much better films coming out from some more notable directors as we go through. Hamnet is going to be coming out too. That'll also be covering by the end of the month. But yeah, if you want to stay up to date on all the latest films, which you're going to want come award season, be sure to subscribe. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon, where you can get access to some exclusive videos as well as early access to my video essays and access to my movie history books as well. Rob D says plan on watching all 8 VHS movies this month. Great. Just to warn you, the first and the third film are probably the weakest, so you might want to steer. Actually, you might want to almost like kind of work backwards, I think. Yes, can't wait for Begonia. I hope it's good. I do too. It's Yorgos Lanthimos, and I love him. Hey, thanks for stopping by, Scorn. So yeah, we'll close this out here. I will say I'll be back in 2 weeks. We're going to be covering a lot of films in the next stream, but for 2 films for sure we will be covering will be Yorgos Lanthimos' Begonia, which is based on the South Korean film Please Save My Planet, which is about a person who kidnaps somebody who they believe is an alien, and they may or may not be. And we'll also be talking about Chloe Zhao's Hamnet, which is somewhat based on the life of William Shakespeare's son. So I don't know too much about the film, which is great because I want to come and do it blind. The trailer just released today. So those are 2 films we'll definitely be covering. And then I think I might be covering If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. So that, and along with a bunch of other smaller films that'll be coming up at Twin Cities Film Fest, I will be covering in 2 weeks. So I will see you next time. And until then, have a good one, everybody. Okay, let's test it before I shut it down. Just see if it. Okay, yeah, connection is still good. Oh, sorry, everyone. All right, good night, everybody. For real this time, shutting it down.